Now to the crisis at the border. The state of Texas is once again taking unprecedented action to secure the southern border. Governor Greg Abbott is issuing an executive order authorizing his state's National Guard and the Texas Department of Public Safety to arrest migrants who illegally cross the border and then send them to Mexico. The move is creating tension between Texas and Mexico's president. That's Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Correspondent Robert Sherman is live. Robert, what can you tell us about this situation?
Well, to put all this into context, Mitch, you have to understand that enforcing immigration law and subsequently the border has always been the responsibility of the federal government. But Texas Governor Greg Abbott contends that the issue has become so bad and so unbearable in his state that he's had no choice but to deploy these state resources and get more involved. So that executive order that he signs reads as follows, and I quote, that he authorizes and empowers the Texas National Guard and the Texas Department of Public Safety to respond to this illegal immigration by apprehending migrants who cross the border between the ports of entry or commit other violations of federal law and return those illegal immigrants to the border at a port of entry. So the president of Mexico came out this week slamming the move, saying that if the state of Texas intends to poorly treat migrants from Mexico or other South American countries, he's going to encourage Mexicans living in the United States to not vote for Texas Governor Greg Abbott and fellow Republicans in the midterms. How much of an impact will that actually have on the outcome of the races? That's hard to say, but it is worth noting that the gubernatorial race here in Texas is expected to be a tight one. And we've seen in some of the recent polling, this is the Real Clear Politics average of polls, shows that the race has narrowed. Texas Governor Greg Abbott with a lead of just over 6 points over challenger Beto O'Rourke, the Democrat and former U.S. congressman out of the El Paso region. But the tensions do not just extend to Mexico and Texas. We've also seen President Biden butting heads at times with the Mexican leader over the last couple of months over the issues of Ukraine and fossil fuels. They will be meeting at the White House today. We'll see if any of those tensions get smoothed over. Mitch?
That is Robert Sherman reporting live for us today. Thank you, Robert.
For more on this, let's bring in our guest, Chuck Mourinho, former Homeland Security Advisor and CEO of Sentinel Security. Good to see you, Chuck.
Morning.
Good morning to you. And obviously, this is a big deal. President Biden meeting with Mexico's president today, especially after he skipped out on last month's Summit of the Americas. So what is the big takeaway? Because it seems as though these two have an even more tense relationship than former President Trump and President Obrador ever had. And they don't agree on a lot of priorities.
Yeah, and that's true. You know, we've got a very complicated relationship with Mexico, starting with a little thing called the Mexican-American War in the mid-1800s.
You're going all the way back to the Mexican-American War?
Listen, it sure does. They do not want the United States dictating what we think their policy priorities should be. And since that point in time, we have seen that consistently through presidential administrations in Mexico. You know, if we look at the previous administration under President Trump, it was singularly focused on immigration and border security. And the message to Mexico was stop the migration so that it doesn't come to the US border, and we'll leave you alone on everything else. And Mexico complied with that because they knew that they could implement all these other policies regarding climate change, regarding the economy, regarding trade, and that President Trump would not give too much pushback. President Biden is trying to normalize that, widen the aperture to a whole range of issues tied to the relationship between the two countries. And as a result, we have many differences with Mexico.
Yeah, and it's not going to be an easy conversation if President Biden does decide to bring up climate change with Mexico's president in that room. What do you think in terms of Mexico's responsibility to help solve the migrant surge? A lot of the people who are attempting to cross over illegally, they're coming from South America. They're crossing through Mexico as a gateway to the United States. And then there's the fentanyl crisis, which we're just seeing has not slowed down at all. What should Mexico's responsibility be to stopping all of this?
Yeah, first thing I'll start with is the fentanyl. Let's look at the outside influences that we're seeing increasing in Mexico. And that influence is coming from both China and Russia. We see it from the Russian position on Ukraine. We see Mexico adapting to that. We see China and fentanyl, and we see Mexico allowing this to come through the cartels into the United States. I do not think the president of Mexico has the appetite nor the capability to help stop what we're seeing relative to migration, human trafficking, drugs, weapons, you name it. Let's remember, too, one other thing. Many of the judicial and law enforcement institutions in Mexico are corrupted. As a result, many of the local police departments, for example, are completely folded up. The primary policing mechanism is either the federal police force in Mexico right now or their military. And because they've gotten their military involved in the policing functionality, their military has now also become corrupted. It really is a big problem down there, and I don't think this is a priority for the president of Mexico.
And I have to get this in, even though our producers are saying we're out of time, Chuck, is that Mexico is urging, Mexican President Obrador, he's urging Mexican Americans not to vote for who he calls anti-immigrant candidates like Texas Governor Greg Abbott. So he's not a fan of President Biden, but he's also not a fan of Texas's very outspoken Republican governor as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, listen, this is where we'll see the political influence be attempted from an outside country into the elections of the United States. But this is nothing new. But, you know, he's got a bigger problem down in Mexico. And the fact that he's focusing on inflation and increasing work visas into the United States tells me that his priorities aren't exactly in line with what ours should be.
Chuck Mourinho, thank you as always for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.